Now with new details on the investigation into the death of actor Gene Hackman, including newly released video.
The gears were still warm. 40 feet beneath Gene Hackman's bedroom, behind a bookshelf that opened with a sequence no one was supposed to know, federal investigators found a tunnel that doesn't exist on a single county record. The wear marks on the lock proved a 95-year-old man in the final stages of heart failure had been climbing down into it during the 7 days his wife lay dead upstairs. He was bringing something up, or going down to check on something, and he never told a soul.
Would have imagined or would have written for this couple.
No, in fact, this really isn't the ending anyone foresaw for Gene Hackman's life.
What was waiting at the bottom of that tunnel is worse than anyone expected. The story everyone was handed. The official version landed clean. Hackman was 95. Betsy Arakawa had died first, blamed on a viral infection. His death was written up as heart failure, an aging man, lost in grief, finally letting go. The estate sat behind thick stone walls, hidden from any nearby road, wrapped in steel gates and motion sensors and thermal cameras that everyone assumed were a celebrity quirk. By the time Gene Hackman vanished from public life, the property wasn't a home. It was a controlled boundary, and nobody driving past ever questioned it. The timeline that broke the case. The first thing that fell apart was the timeline.
We are trying to find out is who the last person was that had contact with your parents. Are there any text messages between you guys or anything like that?
No, we haven't had contact with them lately.
Federal agents pulled data from the estate's central security server, and the numbers didn't match a story of grief at all. Betsy Arakawa had been dead for 7 full days before Gene Hackman died. 7 days. And during that entire stretch, the estate's communication system showed 0 outgoing calls, no 911, no family, no doctor. On the same day Betsy died, Gene personally entered the security code and shut down every internal surveillance camera in the house. At the same moment, he set the outer perimeter alarm to maximum sensitivity. He blinded the inside of the house while turning the outside walls into a tripwire. Drawers had been opened, furniture had been moved, personal safes had been broken into. The pattern of disturbance moved through the house in a deliberate sequence, room by room, floor by floor, as if each space had been visited once and then left. A man whose own heart was failing, sealed inside a house with the body of his wife, was working through a list. That is the behavior of someone finishing a protocol. The ground scan. The physical inconsistencies pushed agents to bring in equipment that doesn't normally show up at a death scene. LiDAR scanners, thermal imaging arrays.
Retrieved the data from the cell phones. There was a determination that was made that Ms. Hackman had made a phone call on February 12th. That phone call was made to Cloudberry.
LiDAR fires rapid laser pulses at a surface and measures how long they take to bounce back, building a precise 3-dimensional map of whatever sits beneath. Investigators aimed it straight down through the floors of the estate. On the very first scan, the system flagged a deep temperature anomaly. It started behind the wall of Gene Hackman's private library and dropped down through dozens of meters of solid New Mexico bedrock. Agents pulled the county's planning records and the civil construction filings to cross-check. Nothing. The structure had never been registered, never been disclosed, never been permitted. Officially, it didn't exist. The entrance was hidden behind a bookshelf. No biometric scanner, no electronic switch, no wireless signal of any kind. What sealed that passage was a heavy mechanical locking system buried in wood and steel, requiring a precise sequence of physical movements and serious force to release the bolts. No radio frequency to detect. Functions during a power outage, impossible to trip remotely. What the gears revealed. When agents finally got it open, the microforensics came back first. Special forensic technician Raymond Voss, brought in from the Albuquerque field office, was the first to examine the gears of the library's mechanical lock under magnification. He'd been told to look for anything inconsistent with long-term inactivity. He stopped, set down his tools, and called his supervisor before writing a single line in his report. The wear marks on the internal gears were fresh, not months old, not years, days. The damage matched the exact 7-day window between Betsy Arakawa's death and Gene Hackman's, with forensic precision. A 95-year-old man in the final stages of heart failure had not been bedridden during his last week. He had been going down into that tunnel, working those heavy mechanical bolts by hand, descending into the cold underground at some point during those 7 days, and climbing back out, until he finally collapsed for the last time. If you're following this, hit subscribe now. What comes next is the part the federal record stops talking about: the descent. The team started down. The upper section, closest to the surface, was reinforced with poured concrete and steel beams. Dr. Marcus Alford, a structural engineer assigned to the federal forensic team, studied the rivet spacing and went silent for several seconds before speaking. He told the lead investigator that the spacing and pour technique matched military-grade construction standards from the 1950s. Exactly. In 30 years of structural analysis, he'd only seen that exact rivet pattern in 2 other places. Both were classified federal sites.
We've struggled to release as much information as we can, as we have. There may be a press release that comes out this afternoon.
At 40 feet down, everything changed. The industrial concrete stopped. The steel beams disappeared. The transition was abrupt, a clean line where one form of construction ended and another began, as if the upper section had been built specifically to seal off whatever was below it. The walls turned into rough stone, marked with thousands of primitive tool impressions running in tight overlapping arcs. The air shifted. Temperature variations that shouldn't exist 40 feet below the New Mexico desert. Sudden humidity changes that pressed against the team's gear. A heavy concentration of oxidized metallic particles floating in the air. The kind of trace left behind by long-term exposure to processes that have no business happening inside a sealed cave. The team's air quality readings spiked and then dropped within a few feet of each other, a pattern Alford had only seen documented in active industrial environments, never in private structures. The hand-carved stone core of that tunnel wasn't modern. It was older than the 1950s reinforcement above it, older than the estate, older than anyone alive who knew about it. The tool impressions on the walls predated industrial machinery entirely. This wasn't a bunker with an old wing. This was an ancient artificial structure that had been militarized in the middle of the last century, sealed behind military-grade concrete, and then buried under a private home with an architect of record who had no apparent knowledge any of it was there. What the DNA revealed. Then the lab returned the rest of the microforensic results, and the entire investigation changed direction. The genetic material recovered from the deepest part of the chamber pointed to biological conditions that should not exist in a sealed underground space beneath a private estate in Santa Fe. The exact classification of what was found has never been released to the public. The agents who saw the report were placed under restrictions that go beyond standard evidence handling. The DNA findings triggered an immediate escalation. The case was pulled out of normal investigative channels and rerouted through classification protocols, typically reserved for active national security infrastructure, not historical curiosity, not a forgotten Cold War relic. Active, ongoing concern. Air samples from the deepest section showed chemical compounds linked to organic metabolic processes, not old residue, not natural geological release, active compounds, produced by living biological systems. The readings did not match any known contaminant the team had reference data for. They did not match decay. They did not match dormant biological material reactivated by humidity. They matched something currently producing them. Whatever Gene Hackman had been protecting down there, it was alive enough to leave a trace.
No, I haven't gotten that far. It's Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman? The actor?
And it was alive enough that the readings were still rising during the hours the federal team was on site. The chamber at the bottom. The natural stone floor had been carefully leveled and etched with a detailed system of astronomical coordinates. A precise map of planetary orbits cut directly into the rock. The lines were fine, deliberate, the work of someone with serious mathematical training and access to instruments most people in the early 20th century would not have had. The kind of work that doesn't belong in a private hideout, and definitely not on the floor of a hand-carved cave hidden under a movie star's house. Wooden crates lay scattered across the ground, packed with metallurgical components of unknown origin. Many of them were single solid pieces with no welding seams, no rivets, no joins. The The metal flowed in continuous shapes, smooth where modern fabrication would show a tool mark, dense where modern alloys would show porosity. Manufactured by a method that has no known precedent in early 20th century industrial metalwork. Nobody on the team could explain how the components had been formed, only that they hadn't been made the way modern factories make things, and that whoever had stocked these crates had stored them carefully, dry, sorted, sealed against humidity. Embedded in the rough stone wall, fixed with corrosion-resistant brackets, was a closed-circuit communication system. A thick coaxial cable wrapped in industrial rubber ran straight through the wall, climbed dozens of meters back up through solid bedrock, and ended in the center of the underground chamber. Dr. Claire Souza, an electrical systems analyst pulled from a federal infrastructure unit, was called in to examine it. She confirmed on the record that this wasn't a leftover from some old renovation. The system was running on a localized alkaline battery array, completely independent of the estate's power grid above, designed to keep operating even if the entire surface lost electricity. She told colleagues it was one of the most intentional pieces of electrical infrastructure she'd ever seen outside of a classified facility. The system was active. The casing had been cleaned and maintained on a regular schedule, kept up against the humidity inside the cavern. When Souza disassembled the connectors, here is what she did not find. No microphone, no speaker, no two-way voice equipment of any kind. Whatever this system was for, it wasn't communication, not in the normal sense. Nobody was meant to talk through it. What the cable ended in was a large mechanical signal transducer, a device built for one purpose: to press against solid surfaces and pick up extremely low-frequency vibrations, tiny pressure changes, subtle movements traveling through dense stone walls, sound below the range a human ear can register, but trackable, recordable, and unmistakable to a trained listener. It converted those vibrations into electrical signals and sent them up the cable.
Got feet. Oh, I see feet too. We see feet over here.
Into a hidden monitoring speaker inside Hackman's private living space upstairs. The transducer had been positioned with care. It was not aimed at the tunnel entrance. It was not aimed at the open chamber. It was pressed flat against the deepest section of the far stone wall, the section the team had not yet been able to examine, the section that ran further back into the bedrock than the lighting could reach. For an unknown number of years, Gene Hackman wasn't just living at that estate. He was stationed there, listening, not to voices, not to broadcasts, not to anything from the outside world. He was listening to the vibrations of whatever was pressing against the other side of a sealed wall, 40 feet beneath his bedroom floor. That is why the cameras went dark. That is why the 7 days went silent. That is why the gears were warm with fresh wear when forensic teams found them. He wasn't dying alone in a house full of grief. He was finishing a job he had been doing for years, and he was the only one left who knew what it was. Drop a comment with what you think was really at the bottom of that chamber. The next video traces the wider network behind the construction of this tunnel and the names that show up in documents nobody was supposed to see. The story of Gene Hackman didn't end at that estate. It just stopped being one anyone was allowed to tell.